Okay, time to talk health with Dr. Kelvin, who's here with us. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Dr. You're looking amazing.
Thank you. I did watch you. Welcome to Heritage Month.
We can't afford to be upstaged the Heritage Month by Dr. Kelvin.
No,
we for force.
But yeah, great to see you as always.
Definitely.
We're talking sickle cell today.
Yes.
Still in 2022, we're talking about sickle cell, Doc.
Well, we can't do much about it. I mean, in times past, sickle cell was actually one of the reasons why we survived as a people, because it has a relationship with malaria.
Okay.
Because yes, the sickle gene is one of the survival evolutionary tactics that helped us to survive malaria, pretty much. But unfortunately, when two people with the gene come together and they produce an offspring, who then has both of the copies of that sickle gene, then the person becomes a sickle cell disease patient or has sickle cell anemia, and so that's when the problems begin.
Okay.
But I must stress that it's the offspring, which means that it's not spread. It cannot be spread from person to person, horizontally. Horizontally, but it is spread vertically. So from parents to child, because there's a lot of discrimination. Sometimes, people sort of shun them because they think it's not an infectious disease at all.
All right, just remind us again how someone gets sickle cell, the combinations that people need to avoid.
Okay, so I mean, simply put, everybody has hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what carries oxygen. Now the hemoglobin gene or the hemoglobin, there are different types of hemoglobin. There's hemoglobin A, which is the normal hemoglobin. Then there's hemoglobin F, which is found in all babies. Then there's hemoglobin S, which is what we are going with, which is what leads to sickle cell disease.
Okay.
Now, when you are born, I'm sure you have all heard about AS, SS, AC, etc. So the AS, so let's say two AS couples, a male who is AS and a woman who is AS, come together, they have a baby. Now, every time there's a pregnancy, there's a 25% chance that baby is going to be born with hemoglobin SS, which means that the genotype is SS. And that is sickle cell anemia. Now, there's also a hemoglobin C, which where you've had AC, SC, and all of that. Now, CC combination is not compatible with life, so you are not likely to come across anybody who is CC.
Okay.
But you can come across somebody who is SC. We put them into the category of sickle cell disease, but when we say sickle cell anemia, we're referring to SS.
Okay.
But the SC is also a bit problematic because they also have some of the symptoms of the SS. So maybe we should just dive straight into the symptoms then. So there are three broad categories of things that affect the sickle cell patients. With the anemia is number one. Then we have infections, and then pain. Now, the anemia is because the hemoglobin S is very good at carrying oxygen, but when oxygen leaves it, when there's desaturation or there's low oxygen levels, it begins to come together and then change the shape of the red cell. The normal red cell is round. I mean, you've seen the pictures, it's round, and that shape enables it to pass through the blood vessels. It's able to deform its body and pass through all the corners, round bends and all of that. But the sickle-shaped sickle-shaped cell is not as flexible, right?
Okay.
And also, the body is not able to. It's not a normal cell, so the body does not recognize as a normal cell. So the spleen begins to break down that sickle-shaped red cell. And because of that breakdown, that's why they tend to have anemia.
Okay.
Because the red cell is normally supposed to stay about 120 days plus, but this one is being broken now within 30, 40 days, so the body is always under pressure to produce more red cells, so there's always a deficit when it comes to red cells, and that's why they are always anemic. And so there's low energy, they're not able to focus in class, they're unable to keep up physically, because of the anemia. And as a result of this, the bone marrow is activated to produce more red cells. So one of sometimes if I see a person and there's something called frontal busting because the skull begins to produce more red cells, so there's some protrusion over here. Sometimes they may have it in the jaw as well, and the liver becomes bigger because these are areas where normally they wouldn't produce red cells, but because of the deficit, they are producing red cells over there. Then we come to the pain. These same sickle-shaped cells, because they are not flexible, they cause blockages of the blood vessels. I mentioned that the normal red cell is able to turn around the corners and everywhere, but the sickle-shaped cell is not able to do that. So it causes blockages in the especially the small blood vessels. And as a result of this blockage, then you begin to experience pain.
Okay.
You see, because once the blood vessel is blocked, it means the blood is not getting beyond the blockage, and the body's response to the lack of oxygen is pain. So they have pain. That's where the crisis all comes about. Crisis paralysis simply means there's blockage of blood supply to wherever the pain is. So if the pain is happening in the leg, it means that there's blockage of blood vessel to the leg. You know, if it's happening elsewhere, you notice the pain. But the interesting thing is that there are parts of the body where you may not necessarily feel pain, but the effect of the blockage is still seen. And the most critical of this is the brain. Because the brain also has small blood vessels. So if the blockage occurs in the brain, then you're going to get stroke. So one of the commonest causes of morbidity and death in sickle cell patients is actually stroke. As a result of, we call it vaso-occlusion. You know, so it happens in the brain, you get a stroke. It happens in the kidney dies, and so you start get, I mean, the portion of the kidney will die, so you start getting blood in the urine and other things. It can happen in the spleen, and then the spleen is gone. And when the spleen dies, then you have the third effect, which is infection, because the spleen plays a very, very, very important role, which is, it serves like a filter, a filtration mechanism. It takes out some of the germs that you have no way of blocking them. So when the spleen is removed, or the spleen is no longer accessible, then the germs are free to roam. And so sickle cell patients are at risk of recurrent infections. You know, so these are the three broad categories of symptoms that sickle cell patients go through. But the way we are discussing it simply, it sounds like something very simple. It's not simple at all. I mean, if you've lived with a sickle cell patient, or you yourself struggle with sickle cell, you understand that it's not a funny situation at all. I mean, my cousin actually died from sickle cell anemia, so I mean, I know what it means. So it's a big deal, and it's something that's good. It's not easy to bring under control because the genetic. It's a genetic issue, you know. It has to do with relationships and, you know, love. and as they say, love is blind. So sometimes
in this case it shouldn't be, you know, for the good of the child. But anyway, Doc, unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to delve into this today, but if people want to learn more, how can they get in touch with you? Well, I'm active on social media, so you can find me Kelvin Owusu MD, and then we can talk more and see how we can intervene. We might have to do part 2 on this. Definitely. There's a lot to talk about with sickle cell. And thank you for joining us for Heritage Month, the first day to talk about sickle cell anemia. Okay, Dr. Kelvin Owusu, thank you again. Right now, we've got to get into our Heritage Month on Air series, the very first one for 2022. Let's check out what we're discussing today.